Some of the most iconic games for the NES came out in 1988. We're going to cover a ton of them in this video. And if you love NES as much as this guy, you gotta make sure you're subscribed. At the beginning of the year, we saw Karnov. And who wouldn't want to play as a bald, buff, fire-spitting dude? Now, I mentioned 87 had a lot of NES games based on arcade ports, and you'll see a ton of those in this video too. When I first played Karnov in the arcade, the NES port I thought was a very good port though. Yeah, you're breathing fire and shooting out these things, and you're picking up all these items too that you can use, sometimes even reuse. This game, super hard. Super difficult game, but man, I still loved playing this game, played it whenever I could. Renegade was fun to see. I was such a big fan of Double Dragon, and then I saw this, and it was like a Double Dragon, but instead of it being like side-scrolling, like reaching a destination, it's almost like more room-based, environment-based. Like you go into a room, and you defeat all the enemies, then you go in the next room, and then you defeat all of those enemies. Interesting as a Nintendo controller game that one button attacks to the left and one button attacks to the right. It was confusing for me at first, but I actually kind of got the hang of it. So never mind which direction you were facing, you could hit the right button and attack the person behind you or in front of you. It actually worked out really well. The more time lasts on, the more I do appreciate Renegade. You ever heard of Contra? Well, I'm sure you have. Yeah, it came out in 1988. One of the original, just two-player run and gun. Still fun today. There are speedrunners with this game. There are people who can do like the no-hit challenge of this game. I can't even make it past the first round without dying at least once, it seems like. I mean, Nintendo was like bringing friends together. You know, a couch co-op, well, all we had was couch co-op back then, didn't have any other options. Everyone's all about the spread gun. The spread gun's fine, it's great. You will impress me? See if you can get through this game with the laser. That's what I'm saying. Gunsmoke on NES, and it was fun to see Capcom do this. So many great arcade ports came to the NES, but sometimes they had a little bit of a twist to them. Gunsmoke, not exactly the same as the arcade version. Close, very close. And if you play the arcade version, you're like, oh, this is Gunsmoke, perfect. But a couple of different, well, one of the first differences you'll hear is it's a different soundtrack. They used a different soundtrack on the NES than the arcade, and I prefer the songs on the NES version. You know, sometimes you can find these people and, you know, upgrade your weaponry and stuff like that too. I do like Gunsmoke, and fun to see on the NES. A little confusing for the weaponry because your B and A buttons either shot diagonally left or right, and you have to hit both buttons to shoot in front of you. I wish you could have changed it so like one of the buttons shot in front of you and then maybe the other one shot, you know, left and right at the same time or something. I don't know. Either way, still a fun game today. Like this one. Good old RC ProAm. Another great game here. I mean, it is just a lap track racing game. Has the Rare charm, because it is made by Rare, and even features things like missiles that you can pick up later in the game to shoot at the other enemies. This could have been the original Mario Kart, had they have come out for, like, if they made a Super RC Pro-Am. Now, we had RC Pro-Am 2 later, but if we had a Super RC Pro-Am, yeah, maybe we could have seen something there. I still like RC Pro-Am today. TNC Surf Design was the game, well, you had to have it. Now, I, back in my day, wore almost exclusively TNC Surf Design t-shirts, even though I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I mean, you had to support it because there is a skateboarding feature in it. So, of course, during the skating days, you know, anytime there's a skateboarding anything, it's like, ooh, skateboarding's in the media. Wow, yeah, let's take advantage of that. And the skateboarding isn't great in this game, but it's the only thing we had, really. There was also a surfing mode, and the more I played this game, the more I appreciated the surfing mode. It's been a while. It's been a while. I used to be pretty good at it. I gotta remember how I played the surfing part, but you got both. It's like 2 games in 1, skateboarding and surfing. Cool. Now, ice hockey was the game that everyone else was playing. Me, personally, I'm not the big sports fan, so I kind of passed this up, but I had friends who liked playing it because they liked beating each other up in this game, basically. I've never been great at this game. Well, okay, let's try again. I've never been great at this game, so it's fun to see. Well, okay, well, you know what I'm getting at. There you go, ice hockey, good for you. Now, City Connection, that's a game I can get behind. I didn't even know this was based on an arcade game, but didn't matter to me, loved playing this game. I liked City Connection because it reminded me of Miner 2049er on the ColecoVision that I played of all things. Yeah, car racing, and you can shoot the oil cans and, you know, whatever. But you have to fill in the tracks, the paths, and that's how you move on to the next stage. Has a catchy tune. I think it was fun. Rambo, another great game. I remember I had some friends who didn't care for it because it was so common. Well, maybe not when it first came out, but when game trading started to come about, they're like, I remember seeing this one pretty regularly. And simple graphics and everything, but this was one of the first this came out before Zelda 2, at least in the United States, but it is that what we call today Metroidvania style, where it's not just level 1, level 2, level 3, it's not linear. You have items you can use. You can build up your character. When you get through these experience levels, you'll have a stronger knife to stab enemies with, so you're not using your projectile things, which you do have some projectiles here. There's little spots, little compass maps on the floor that you can go north or south or whatever, and you're gonna eventually run into a dead end or find where you need to go. Huge fan of Rambo, love this game. Double Dragon did eventually come out for the NES, not exactly like the arcade game, but we'll take it. I have no idea what Gregor is, but okay. It's another game where you build experience points in a way. Like when you reach a certain level, then you can do different moves. Like you don't just start with a drop kick, or jump kick, rather. You have to kind of build up those levels. I mean, it's still pretty much Double Dragon, but it has a little different twist to it, just to make it interesting. I mean, it's not the Sega Master System version, but for the NES version, I thought it was pretty cool. And there was a one-on-one fighting element in this game too that you could play as, which I thought was kind of fun. Metal Gear, oh my god, I remember when Metal Gear came out, not when it came out, but I do remember when I first played Metal Gear, and I was blown away by how large the map was. The fact that there was like a deep story involved with this. You're contacting, home base with your transmitter and all that. Stealth action. At the time, I didn't even think that was a thing, because usually on any other game, as soon as you show up on screen, they all just charge at you, and you got to get them before they get you. But this game taught you that if you just sneak past the guys, you don't have to kill them. And I thought that was a wonderful thing. I mean, full of all the quotes you could possibly use. The truck have started to move. I feel asleep. I mean, in this game, you are attempt to contact missing our gray fox. So, anything's possible. Legendary Wings is a legendary game from Capcom. Again, another game from the arcade, I believe. I never saw it in the arcade, though, but I did like this NES game. Couple of different gameplay styles, too. Got that overhead shooter. I did like this style of game. I like this overhead shooter style. And then I liked when you can get sucked into these. Now, you don't have to do this. I chose to because that was my favorite part of the game when you go through the side-scrolling modes. I thought that was kind of fun. It's like, oh, you can do overhead and you also got side-scrolling. Yeah, it's like 2 games in 1 again. Come on now. Oh my god, Life Force. I am more nostalgic for Life Force than I am Gradius by a country mile. I played so much Life Force. I was aware of Gradius and it was fine. But this was it. This was the game to have. I remember thinking to myself too, like, oh, they ripped off, they ripped off Gradius and made it better. It's like I didn't realize it was like part of the same universe or or whatever. You just shoot around and build up your ship and all that too. You get super annoyed when you're all built up and then all of a sudden you die and you lose all your items and all that, and you just contemplate just hitting a reset just to start over again. I hear you. Hudson's Adventure Island, another hot take. Adventure Island is better than Wonder Boy by a country mile, kind sir. Now this is just me talking, but this is and I did play a little bit of the Wonder Boy, Monster World, those style of games. Those are fine. But man, this was the game for me. Especially when Adventure Island 2 and 3 and them came out too. But very similar, you pick up the fruit, you move on from there. It's just a fun game. And difficult. You can have your ghosts and goblins, you can have your Battletoads. In my book, Hudson's Adventure Island, the most difficult NES game. You don't believe me? Try beating it. Come on now. Especially when it gets to like 8-2, 8-3, when you're doing like those weird jumps through the spiders and the fire. I can't do it. I can't do it. Not even with a Game Genie. I can't do it. Go-Go 13 was a cool one. I wasn't familiar with the character at the time, but I remember knowing for some reason in the back of my mind that this was based on a Japanese comic. Manga before I knew what a manga was. Graphic novel before I knew what a graphic novel was. I remember playing this game thinking to myself, this is like a game for adults, I think. First impression was this game will never win Graphics of the Year, that's for damn sure. A little confusing. Sometimes the enemies look like the people who are trying to help you. Stuff like that. You don't know if you should shoot them or not. But then the more I got into this game, the more I really kind of fell deep into this game too, where there's not just the storyline too, but the different gameplay modes. There's like the maze walking, the underwater part, the part where you go into the first person view to shoot the other people and stuff like that too. A lot going on with Go-Go 13. I'm a big fan. Jackal is another one of those, man, you got 2 players, you already got Contra, so you're good to go there. But then Jackal came around. Woo, come on now. Great 2-player, but also an extremely fun 1-player game as well. Overhead shooter, you also got your grenades, your bombs, your save the people and all that too. So you have that element to consider as well. Makes you not want to die more than you need to. At least try not to, because now you're carrying precious cargo in the name of these people you're trying to rescue. Jackal's a great time. Not the longest Nintendo game by any stretch of the imagination, but it's super, super fun. Great music. Jackal is way at the top of the list, and it came out in 1988. Milan's Secret Castle was more of my style of NES game. It looked cute, it looked fun, it was a little confusing. Okay, let's be honest, it was a lot of confusing. But when I saw games like this, I was like, ooh, this is my kind of game. This is the kind of game that I gravitated towards. These kind of kid cartoony looking games that have a lot going on with them, and there's a lot of exploration, and there's money involved, so you can buy upgrades and items and stuff like that. And it was a little quirky, you know. I loved it. I loved this game. I've never beaten it, not even with a Game Genie. I've never even gone through it. I really should one of these days. But I loved games like this. It's a little rough for me to come back to today. Even capturing this footage here, I was like, man, I used to love this game. Why? It's, you know, your bubbles are going up and down, the jumping's a little off, the jumping's a little weird. I don't know, I just liked this game. I thought it was a lot of fun. 1943, I played this a bunch at the Red Robin in Yakima, Washington. I did like 1942, and hold on, we've got two buttons here. Is the first button I'm gonna shoot, is it gonna be a bullet, or is it gonna be the crash bomb here? Oh, I actually got it right this time, perfect. I usually hit the bomb almost every time. This game's interesting because this game, instead of having your loop-de-loop that 1942 had, you have your crash, which kills all the enemies on screen. This game was interesting because it would drop items, and you can kind of choose the item. By keep on shooting it, it could give you a different weapon. Maybe you want to upgrade a certain thing, or you turn into the, like, what they call the shotgun. I think it's what that one is. No, I mean, I'm a big fan of the 1940 games. You know, 42, 43. There's a 41. Is there a 44X? I don't know. There's a few of them out there. 42, 43 are the, you know, pretty much the main ones for me. And 1943 is the best of those as far as I'm concerned. The title screen may say Mickey Mouse, but you know this game as Mickey Mouse Capades. That's right. Fun to see a Mickey Mouse game. The Mickey Mouse games, as I've said in several videos, are generally pretty good. Anything that stars Mickey Mouse as a lead character, you know the game's gonna be pretty good. Sometimes very good. And sometimes, like in this case, yeah, pretty good, pretty good. It was fun to see a Disney license in a Nintendo game because everyone was very familiar at least at this point. You know, Disney was so shoved down our throats by being the coolest magical thing ever. Some people still believe that, but you knew the characters, and so it wasn't like you're trying to, you know, discover a new storyline or anything. It's like, oh, you're waiting for the cameos. You're waiting for someone to pop up, and you can say, oh, I know that guy. Very, very cool. And that happens a few times in this game. And it's actually a pretty decent game. It's a little confusing sometimes, but it's a pretty decent game. Psycross, I remember seeing advertised more than it probably should have. Like in the magazines, and I remember it being a thing in the Nintendo Power, and it just looked cool when I saw the photos, when I saw the pictures, and then when I played the game, I wasn't that impressed. But it was a game that came out in 1988, and it was a game I did at least play. I don't think I ever owned it. I think I had a friend who did, though, and I borrowed his, or I played it at his house or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. You know, and now that I saw the pictures and now that I actually controlled the game, now I get it. And it's not for me. Spy vs. Spy. This game was for me. I loved this game. Two-player versus the computer was fine and fun. I would play it two-player sometimes with my brothers. And it's just an awkward, weird game. I was a huge fan of Mad Magazine, especially during this time. I had a subscription to Mad Magazine for several years in my youngest youth. And the idea that you can play as my favorite part, or one of my favorite parts, I should say. There's a few of my favorite parts of Mad Magazine, but one of the ones I would always look forward to, one of the highlights for me, was Spy vs. Spy. I was such a big fan. And in this game, a little bit like at least the comic strip, you're setting booby traps and everything like that to get all the items so you can move through and escape with all the stuff. And if you're having to be on the same screen, you duke it out, or shank it out, depending. And you can also set up these booby traps behind doors, behind things, so when they're trying to find these items, then they might get it as well, which will, you know, buy you a little bit of time to, you know, do some more exploration on your end. I would have loved it if they would have made a Spy vs. Spy versus Spy, because there is a third one that pops up later on. Yeah, the girl gray one, but yeah, pretty fun. Super Mario Bros. 2 came out in 1988, and it took the world by storm. Super Mario Bros. 2, for me, was the second round of system seller. When you saw this game, I like this game more than Mario 3. I'll say it out loud. When you saw this game in commercials, when you saw this game in magazines, you're like, holy moly, this looks like an experience. And it was. I don't need to talk a whole lot about Super Mario 2. You're already very familiar with it. I don't need to tell you about the whole Doki Doki Panic nonsense. But since you're here anyway, I'll share with you something, a little trick that you can do that maybe you didn't know you could do. You grab the potion, you get 5 cherries, the star pops up, get the star, drop your potion, go inside the door, go back through the door as it's running out, and you'll hear that alternate version of the Mario 1 theme until you move on through another door or something like that, just so you can hear the whole version of the song. Yeah, the version goes on at least a little bit longer. Yeah, just for you. There you go. Anticipation is the name of this game. I love this game. It's probably, maybe next to Silent Service, maybe next to Major League Baseball, it could be the cheapest, the least expensive NES game in the entire library. And I love it. I unironically love Anticipation. Played it a bunch. I played it, I still pop it in every once in a while, just for fun. And if you're not super familiar, it's a board game style game. It looks like Trivial Pursuit, it's not. It's a board game style game where the different tiles represent a different category. And then sometimes there are connected dots. Sometimes it'll tell you how many letters are in the word. You guess the word as it's coming up there. Based on where the die is, whatever you land on, if you get it right, you'll move that many spaces to get to the next thing. You fill in those and you move on to the, the upper stages and all that. It's just kind of fun and interesting to see. And I did not plan this. I would not have said this. You can blame Nintendo for calling a woman a thing. Leaving it at that. Moving on to an awesome game in Blaster Master. Let's forget about what just happened there. And this game is the game to have. If you have a small set of NES games, you're just getting into Nintendo collecting, and you just want to have a few games on the shelf, this is one of those must-have, must-own games. Absolutely love it. Still absolutely love it today. It was some of the best graphics on an NES game back in these days. Some of the best sound. Very important, in my opinion. The fact that you can get out of your tank and go inside these smaller rooms, and then it turns into a different style of game completely, I thought was absolutely wonderful. A huge fan of Blaster Master. Bobble, those arcade games coming home and keeping it all with 100 levels, 100+ levels, because to get the true ending, you have to go through that door in level, 99 to, or was it 99 or 100? It was one of those levels. Maybe it was 100. And you have to have 2 players to do it, to get there to it on time. It's insane. But what a fun game. And again, another great 2-player couch co-op. We didn't call it couch co-op back then. We just called it 2-player because that's, again, well, all there was. Lap co-op? No, let's not say that. We have Bobble's great. Still great. Cobra Command was a game I was a big fan of. A little bit of a hidden gem by today's standards. 1988. It did come out in the arcade. The NES version is different, as this one is a little bit more adventurous. This one, you're a helicopter. As you can shoot bullets as well as missiles. You're rescuing people along the way. You are finding the enemy bases, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. As you drop down, you can, again, now you're in this underground area, so a whole new stage for you. You can land on these enemy depots to steal their weaponry, and then find these little mini bosses along the way to save more people and rescue more people too. Unlike Jackal, once you rescue them, they're rescued, so you don't have to rescue them and then drop them off somewhere like you would with a Chopper Command or something like that. Very, very fun game. Love this game. Bionic Commando, another instance. Great arcade game, and then the NES version, completely different. The only similarity is you play as the same character. Instead of having a jump button, you have that grapple arm button. And you can use that to pull yourself up on the ledges, to swing across things. I liked it when you can go inside these little bases and communicate with at home, or even wiretap to, get enemy intel, stuff like that. I do like Bionic Commando. The arcade version is fun. I prefer the NES version just because I love the, the kind of exploration style game. Very, very fun. Castlevania II, Simon's Quest. This one took the world by storm. A little bit like other games like Mario to Mario 2, Zelda to Zelda 2. We have Castlevania to Castlevania 2, where it's just like you played the first one, and the second one's going to be completely different, but still enough of the similarities to keep you interested. And I prefer this one. Believe it or not, I like Castlevania 2 more than the first one. Now, when you mention when you mention Metroidvania, this is the reason why. Because you're like, Metroidvania, Castlevania, because it's there's no exploration. Like with Metroid you can, and Castlevania 1, a little bit with 3, not as much. But Castlevania 2 harkens back or forward or way into the future when it starts doing games like, Nocturne of the Moonlight, or what's the Castle of the Moon, what, Symphony of the Night, that's what I'm trying to think of. Good lord, think of the Japanese version. And all of the other Castlevania games, pretty much, with that 2D style. The DS games are really great too. But just the fact that you could explore, and it was a little cryptic, because, I remember playing this game and thinking to myself, you'll talk to someone, they're like, oh, sit on the edge of the Deborah Cliff. I was like, how would you even possibly think I would have a clue where the Deborah Cliff is? Or, or the lead, whatever it is. It's like, oh, we gotta go to the Blood Lake. It's like, what? I don't have a map. What are you talking? There's no sign. I mean, sometimes there's a sign for the towns and stuff like that, but I don't know. I had a lot of fun with this game. It's been a long time since I played all the way through it. I might have to do that on Twitch sometime soon. Paperboy is a fantastic game. Love me some Paperboy. Loved it in the arcade, but better on the NES. Not graphically or anything like that. It just, the handlebar controllers were too much of a gimmick for me. I just need a gamepad. I didn't care about delivering papers to the houses that needed it. I just wanted to shoot newspapers through the windows. That was good enough for me. Now, I know you're supposed to deliver houses or deliver papers to the houses that need it. If you get a perfect row, a perfect, round, you'll get more and more houses that that aren't subscribers into subscribers. I learned that by playing through this game with a Game Genie. Still such a difficult game, but it still has a charm to it, and it was this one of those cool ideas. I'm glad somebody came up with an idea like this to make a Paperboy game. I had a paper out when I was 12. I can relive the magic of waking up at 4:35 a.m., wrapping newspapers on a Sunday morning. I don't know. And at this point, can we all agree that Paperboy crashing on the NES is the worst NES graphic of all time? Like, what is this? This is me testing what paintbrush palettes look like on Mario Paint. I have no idea. This is a tangled mess of... Anyway, Rampage. Now, this is a fantastic game. Rampage is a whole lot of fun two-player. You can play it one player just fine. They left out the Wolfman, which is unfortunate, but it's fine because I always played as George anyway, so it didn't matter to me. Crashing through the buildings, you knock them down and move on to the next stage. Tons of levels. I forgot how many levels. There's 100 of them or something like that. Yakima, I believe, my hometown, is a level on this game, like way later in the game. But super fun. I mean, I don't know. It's great. It's Rampage. And fun to see from the arcade to the NES and have it be a very good port. Skate or Die, another game you had to support because it was a game where you play as a skater. So this is a skateboarding game with a few different skateboarding options. That's right. You have a few things you can choose from. To actually play the game, the controls aren't great at all. But you do have to kind of get used to them because, again, this is all you got. Yeah, one of those. We're going to play TNC Surf Design again? We need a skateboarding game. I always liked landing on the cop car to make the siren go off. They got like the half pipe thing. That's always kind of fun. I was never good at it. The joust was probably the most popular part of this game, I would think. But Skate or Die came out in 1988, late in the year. We mentioned it briefly just a little bit ago. Zelda 2. Now, my go-to answer, because I get asked this at conventions and stuff, this game here, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, is my favorite game of all time. I say that, is it the best game in the world? No. But I say that because when this game came out, and the first time I played this game, I was blown away about how massively huge the world was, that there was palaces that had different items, and you needed to find which items worked where and on what. This was an epic adventure, and a game that took me a long time to get all the way through. Now, there are speedrunners today that can go through it, but it was just kind of me going through it back when I knew the maps and stuff like that, too. I didn't have any of the tricks or anything like that back then, but it was just fun to just walk into town and talk to people and hang out with this lady for a little while. Because, especially with your teenage years, you can come up with your own imagination what's going on there. Leave the door open, huh? All right. That's cool. And you thought 1988 was fantastic? Just wait till you see the games that came out in 1989. Now, we didn't cover all of them in this video, but there were like 53 games that came out in 1988. There was over 100 licensed games that came out in 1989. The next video that we do of this series is going to be insane. Make sure you're subscribed. We'll check out these other videos along the way, too.